All right, so welcome. So I just started with a little, how do I check my audio? Of course, you don't have to use audio if you don't want to. You can use that little text message feature over there on the left-hand side. So can you guys see my PowerPoint slides up there in your view? I see it in mine, but I'm not always sure that other people can see what I see, so hopefully you can. Good. All right. So this is our first Biology 1047 Skype class. So hopefully this recording goes smoothly and I will be able to post that to YouTube that I can then share in our Unit 1 video section. So I think it was probably the same for you last semester. If you're not able to participate live, then I will add a little question into that discussion along with the video that you can go ahead and answer to get the participation point. So participating in all 6 of our Skype sessions in some way, whether that's answering the question after you watch the video later or joining live, will get you 1 point for each one. So actually 6 points can make a big deal at the end. So take advantage of the easy points where they come. So my slide here just shows that little chat button. You guys are both using it just fine. And then you can mute and unmute your mic if you just want to ask a question via the microphone. And then hang up, unmute your mic, all of the, if you wanted to share video. I usually don't share a lot of video because it does make the file really big. So I don't usually use video, but there may be opportunity for it. All right, so hopefully, I think you've all kind of done the welcome unit. Actually, I know you all have. Got to look through things and participated in our welcome discussion, so I thank you for that. Just a reminder, for most discussions, you do have to reply to one of your peers as well, so make sure you don't miss out on the points for doing that, like a thoughtful reply to your peers. And those things were due at the end of the day on Sunday, so that's kind of in the past now, but just check out that course calendar for dates and when things need to be done by. So I have also added our Skype dates in there as well. And I did put, I've added in 6 Skype sessions, but sometimes I add some pre-recorded ones, or if people are requesting to have more, like extra question and answer or whatever, then we can always stick in more if we want as we go along. So I'm really flexible and open to that sort of thing. So Unit 1, so you've all kind of looked at and started Unit 1. And so I'm just going to go through some of the basics for that for this unit, talk about some of the major topics that are happening in it, and I think we'll also then maybe peek at, I'll share my screen so we can peek at our Brightspace page. I'll just talk a little bit about, the assignments for this unit. So everything is due for this January 20th. So it's a little bit of a shorter unit, but it's kind of an easier one compared to some. So a lot of your units will actually have more time than that. So Chapter 13 is part of your evolution learning for this course. So there's also going to be another piece to evolution come up later in Unit 7. So it's sort of covered in a different way than the other topics. So everything that we learn about is going to be tested in some way for like on your proctored tests that you're doing, other than this evolution chapter. So chapter 13 is not one that you really need to study as far as your proctored tests go, but you will be learning from it and displaying your knowledge for that based on your assignment that you have to do for this unit. So that picking of the example of things that kind of prove, or not necessarily prove, but show evidence toward evolution. So that in this unit, and then we'll revisit it again. So you can display your knowledge in that area in other ways other than the test. And then chapter 21 is the other part of this unit, which is getting into our body structure and function. So I'll kind of go over a little bit there. Okay, so chapter 13. So evolution. So this is kind of a very fitting if you have ever been in or around the Truro area. If some of you are around here, so deer are constantly, like, I think I've had more run-ins with deer and almost hitting them with my vehicle here in Truro than anywhere else, because they're getting so used to living around humans. And so there's some, over time we're probably going to notice some evolving happening there and how comfortable they are around people and whatnot. This is just a book. We won't worry about that. So in part of your assignment was picking, those lines of evidence and things like fossils and how those structures that they see in fossils will relate to, species we see now or other fossils that we found, to kind of prove that things are, similar in some ways, but changing as they adapt to their environment. Darwin is a big piece of that. So like reading through that will kind of give you a feel for how his theory of evolution came to be. I won't go into too much detail with that. There's a short, pretty cool explanation in your book. But the turtle is a good example of, they have a lot of similarities, these two tortoises, but because they, lived in separate areas, isolated from one another, one evolved more to being able to eat, thicker vegetation that's close to the ground, versus the guy on the right, whose shell evolved to allow him to be able to reach up to higher vegetation because he's unable to find much of it down low. So there are some kind of questions to get you thinking as we go through this presentation. So if you want to use your messaging feature over on the left to answer the question, or if you don't know it, that's okay. We will review it anyway. And then I do have some polls where you can actually just click on the answer later on, and they're kind of more questions in line with what you could see on the test. So we'll do that a little bit later. So Darwin's theory has its main principle of what causes evolution to happen. Does anyone venture a guess? Natural selection, that's right. So natural selection is just, certain animals will have traits that are better suited for survival, and so they're more likely to pass on their genes and create more people too, more organisms that also have that trait that make it more likely for them to survive in their environment. So you're right, it's natural selection. Okay, so your assignment was to kind of pick one of those streams of evidence, so things like homologies or in fossils, and then pick out an example of that wasn't in your textbook. These pictures are actually from the 5th edition of the textbook, but a lot of it's very much the same, so you might also see these same pictures in the current edition. Just showing different ways that you can see structures and fossils. There's that mosquito from Jurassic Park. And then, so the other stream, and a lot of you picked this one, was to look at homologous structures. And the example in your book is the bones that are in limbs of like humans, cats, whales, and then even going as far as bats that you see. You know, the bones look a little bit different, but they're all still there and still similar. They've just changed, you know, length a little bit and whatnot. So that is an evidence that, you know, if you go far enough back, they have came from a similar organism at one point in history. So examples, the homologous structures, molecular homology. So now we can look at DNA and see how closely our DNA is matched to other ones. And then one other type of structure that I've left blank here, if anyone like to venture a guess, vestigial structures, that's right. So vestigial means that you have some kind of structure that may no longer serve a real purpose, but if you go back far enough in your ancestry, there would have been an organism that used that structure. And I'll have a picture of that here in a second. And then embryos. So in your textbook, it shows the example of a chicken embryo compared to a human embryo and how similar we look when we are newly conceived. There's that picture of the bones in the arm, DNA, and how closely we're related to certain other organisms. And this is actually a picture showing the entrance to the appendix. So, you know, our immune system unit will look a little bit into, you know, the appendix isn't completely useless, but we can survive just fine without it. So they do consider it to be like a vestigial organ. But if you look at some other organisms, they still have an appendix that serves a very, very important functions, like horses, for example. But we still have those same organs. It's just changed slightly, which shows we would have a common ancestor somewhere in the distant past. There's a picture of the chicken and the human embryo looking very similar. This is showing like an evolutionary tree, being that, you know, if you go back far enough, many things will have a common ancestor, like lungfish and everything else. If you go back to this number one spot on the tree, if you go back to that number one spot on the tree, there will be some kind of common ancestor there. So like on this tree, for example, ostriches and fox and other birds would have the most recent common ancestor, and that ancestor would have feathers as the similarity. So population, so that's just part of natural selection. Like a population can grow and evolve in isolation of other populations. This is an example of that. These are actually lakes that end up being very isolated from one another, and therefore you may find different species and different kind of evolutionary traits in the species within them. Don't worry about that. So do we have any questions, or do you guys have, we have 7 people now. That jumped up quickly. Or I just didn't notice when everyone came. Welcome, everybody. We did start at 6, and I started the recording, so hopefully it records all right. I'm just going to, please use you can use your microphone if you want to talk, to ask any questions, or that little text icon in your bottom left-hand screen. You can type things, okay? Does everyone hear me all right? Just right. Does anyone have questions about, evolution? I mentioned it's not going to be a big thing on your first upcoming test, but it is something you need for your assignments that we're doing. I'm just taking a quick note of who has joined us so I can give you your participation points before I leave tonight. All right, if there's no questions, I'll flip over to, and I did give an extra little explanation of that evolution assignment in the Q&A for Unit 1 because I had a couple people email me asking for, a little bit more of an explanation. So I did write out something there too if you're interested. All right, so chapter 21, we're going to start getting into the structure and function of things. So kind of the overarching vocabulary with it would be anatomy and physiology. So anatomy, and you can use your text over on the side, or you can use your microphone to tell me, if you'd pick A, B, C, or D for this question, or even if you look in the top right-hand corner of my PowerPoint there, you can even grab a little pen and make marks too if you want, like this. And hopefully you can all draw a little bit better than me, but so anatomy is the study of an organism's blank, while physiology would be the study of blank. And a commonly used term in biology is form, fits, blank. So would it be A, B, C, or D?
Is it C?
It is C. You are right. Yep, it's C. So we can just circle C here. So anatomy is more the study of the organism's structure, so the actual pieces that make it up. And while physiology is the study of function, so that's how the pieces work. And then a commonly used term in biology is just form, fits, function. So an example of that is, so our back molars have the form of being kind of wider and flatter than our front teeth. And that is because our back molars are used for grinding up food. It's not necessarily for cutting. It doesn't need a sharp edge. It just needs to mash the food and grind it up. So that's an example of how the form of our back molars will fit its function. All right, so this is a good, and when you're studying, drawing yourself little pictures like this is a great way to get information to stick in your memory a little bit. But starting up here, so this is giving an example of a cardiac muscle cell. So we always start off with cells, and then cells will come together to create a tissue. And in this example, it is showing a cardiac muscle tissue. And then various tissues will come together to create an organ. And then for more complex organisms, so you won't find this in like a single cell amoeba or something, but those organs will then come together to create an organ system. So in this example, it's your circulatory system. And those systems are kind of what we look at as a whole for each of our units that we're going through here. But for Unit 1, we're kind of just looking how all of these fit together. So this first one could be any kind of cell in our body, really, that comes together to make, and we'll look at the various types of tissues. And then those tissues come together to make those organs. And so drawing yourself little examples like this is a good way to study, if that works for you. So cells of the same type working together, so coming together, are creating tissues. So animals have 4 main categories of tissues. And so what are they? If you want to write them over there or think them in your head. You can use something like this great text box feature over here. Like epithelial tissue would be your first type of tissue. And what's this one that starts with C? Connective, that's right. And this one that starts with M? Muscle, correct. And then the last one is nervous, that's right. So those are the 4 main types of tissues that you're going to find in most animals, including humans. And then connective tissue, of course, has to get more complicated and have 6 different types. And then muscle tissue also has 3 different types. So let's look at those a little bit deeper. So epithelial tissue is this is the guy that's going to be covering a lot of surfaces of your body and lining organs. So it's quite plentiful in your body. Also, tends to be made up of some rapidly replenishing cells. So if you think about, the cells lining your stomach, those are getting a lot of wear and tear. They're going to need to replenish quickly. Also cover it like epithelial tissue that covers our body, like our skin. It gets a lot of damage from UV rays and exposure to our environment, so it needs to be able to heal and replenish quickly. So this is a very widespread tissue in our body. My computer's telling me I need to restart. Well, I hope it can wait. Connective tissue. So here's a question about connective tissue. So this is the one that has 6 different types. So connective tissues have a sparse population of blank spread out throughout a jelly-like material or a material called the blank matrix. So if you've had a chance to read your textbook and look at connective tissue, this is kind of what defines it or makes it apart or brings it apart from the other types of tissues. And that's right, it has a sparse population of cells spread throughout an extracellular matrix. So that's how all of these connective tissues work. Let me just see what the next slide is here. Okay, muscles. All right, just some, little pointers, I guess, about the various types you have here. So the loose connective tissue, so that's just a tissue still. It's going to be within its own little extracellular matrix and the cells inside of it. So this tissue is what is kind of underneath our skin, so it's the most common, and it's kind of binding that epithelial tissue to everything underneath. Let me just get a little pen here. All right, so adipose tissue, so this is again still in the extracellular matrix, and it's where your body is storing fat. That's a terrible arrow, I apologize. So, there are reasons for this. It's not necessarily just a bad thing, right? So, adipose tissue is going to help insulate your body, cushion it a little bit. If you've been skating at all this winter, maybe you'll be thankful for that. And it can help, it really does help keep your body better able to regulate internal temperature as well. It helps prevent heat from escaping. All right, so blood. So this is the one that's a little bit different from the others in that the matrix, that blood is suspended, the cells of blood are suspended in, is liquid. So plasma is a liquid matrix in comparison to the others that has more of a fibrous, and if it's bone, it's a really kind of very hard because it also has calcium in there. But blood is the one that has its cells suspended in liquid, but still counts as connective tissue, so that's kind of surprising for some. Fibrous connective tissue, so this next one down here. So this guy is going to be connecting a lot of our muscles to bone, and then some ligaments will be joining bones to other bones. So it's a pretty tough connective tissue. A little bit harder is the cartilage connective tissue. So it can be found at the ends of bones, can help connect bones to other bones as well. But it's also found in places like your ear. So if you wiggle your ear, you can get a good feel for what cartilage might feel like, how sturdy it is, and also like the end of your nose. And we'll talk about it even a little bit more as a respiratory system, because that's what helps hold your trachea open so that you can breathe. And then bone, which we mentioned, is in the most dense extracellular matrix, so it also has deposits of calcium in it, so making it pretty hard, but at the same time not being overly brittle either. So again, make yourself a little chart, draw yourself some pictures, do what you have to kind of remember those 6 as being connective tissues and what kind of sets them apart from the other tissues and each other. Muscle tissue. Okay, so 3 different types here. So the most plentiful, or what you think of first really, is going to be your skeletal muscle. So those are the ones that are going to move your skeleton, so responsible for all the voluntary movements that you do in the run of the day, like talking and walking and playing basketball like this lady. So it's all voluntary. You can control these ones. Now the second type is cardiac, so you're only going to find this in one place in your body, and that's your heart. So these muscles are responsible for making that coordinated heartbeat that we're going to talk about more in our circulatory system. And then smooth muscle. So cardiac muscle is not voluntary, obviously. Like, you're not thinking there, okay, heart, beat, beat, beat. So you do not have control over that cardiac muscle. And that is the same with smooth muscle. So that's also not voluntary. And this type of muscle, so it's kind of guiding principle is that it can contract slowly over long periods of time. So it's lining things like your digestive tract, so it's moving food along. And also in females, the uterus is lined with smooth muscle in order to expel a baby during labor. So that's the contracting slowly over long periods of time. That's how you can think of smooth muscle. And if you have any questions, please just ask or jump in on the mic. And the last type of tissue is nervous tissue. So over here on the left of this picture is a neuron. So that's the basic unit of your nervous tissue. So this is a single cell here, and that comes together to make nervous tissue. And so this is responsible for the communication happening throughout your body. So if you touch a hot stove and burn your finger when you're making pancakes, then because of nervous cells and nervous tissue, your body can communicate that to your brain, or even not your spinal cord, and pull your finger away before you really get injured. So toward the end of, or getting on in this chapter, it starts to talk about you're, exchanging with the external environment and how, our internal environments are regulated. So this is the start of homeostasis, which is part of another unit as well, but it is kind of included here because it is a big concept in how our organ systems work together. So this picture is this could be a human, this could be whatever. This is just a very simplified version showing that we are an open system, meaning that we are always exchanging chemicals, energy, air, all of that with our external environment. So we are an open system. We're always exchanging things with our environment. So we're eating, taking in food, we're taking in oxygen, we're breathing out carbon dioxide, we are defecating, sweating, we're giving off heat or taking in too much heat. So the concept there is that we are an open system. So homeostasis, if you've had a chance to read about it much yet, what would you say is the definition here that best suits, A, B, or C? So is it staying relatively unchanged even though the world around it changes? Would it be maintaining a constant internal state? Or would it be preventing negative feedback? So we'll talk about what negative feedback is here in a second too, but
you say it B?
So it is very common to go toward B, but if you think about something like body temperature, are we always exactly at 36 degrees Celsius? Not usually, right? Our body temperature will still fluctuate some. So what they do is they call it being relatively unchanged. So even though if I go outside right now and it's 10 below, my body temperature is not going to become 10 below unless I died, but it will fluctuate slightly though. It could go down slightly as I cool off some. Or similar to if I go outside and it's 30 above, my temperature might fluctuate slightly. Or even, when you first wake up in the morning, your temperature tends to be a little bit lower than later in the day. So the answer is actually A. So it's just staying relatively unchanged. So you're still going to have some fluctuations, but really small ones, even though your surrounding environment is changing. So that is homeostasis A. So a principle behind this is how homeostasis generally kind of works. So most of the time, most of these mechanisms are going to depend on something called negative feedback. So what does this mean? So this means that, a process is creating a certain result, and that same result is actually going to stop the process from happening. So that can sound a little bit confusing, but your textbook does use a real kind of cool example in like heating your room. And you can think about this the same as heating your body, which is also an example it gives. But so this is showing that, so this is an example of negative feedback. So you want your room to be 20 degrees Celsius. So the temperature starts to get a little bit above that. As it gets too warm, the thermostat or your control center is going to stop the heat. So then the temperature goes down. So your heater is actually producing the heat, but once it produces too much, it's just going to stop. So the result of it is heat, but that same result is actually going to stop it. So that's negative feedback. And then the other part, okay, so I can, the less common version of this is positive feedback. And so this doesn't happen as often in the human body, but it does happen sometimes. And an example of it is labor. So when a woman is in labor, the results, so which is creating contractions, actually intensify the same process. So as labor goes on, it gets, stronger, more efficient, better able of, pushing the baby out. Whereas if that relied on negative feedback, the more, hormone that was created to create contractions, it would get to a certain point and then it would shut off, which is what you don't want to happen because you want the baby to be born. So that's an example of positive feedback. Another example is also related to women and babies, but lactating. So with breastfeeding, the more milk is expressed from a woman's breast during breastfeeding, the more milk she will make. So instead of making less, the more a baby nurses, which would be negative feedback, the more a baby nurses, the more milk she will make. So those are examples of positive feedback. So in humans, we can maintain our own internal body temperature. Again, when I go outside and it's -30, my body temperature does not match -30. And so that's an example of homeostasis for us, which is thermoregulation, so regulating our own internal temperature. So that's either going to cool our body slightly to keep it at a set point or heat it. So what are some examples, I wonder, can you think of that our body does if we're getting too cold or too warm? You can give examples of either if you like. Goosebumps. Yeah, that's a good one. And goosebumps is actually, slightly related to evolution, because when humans were much more furry, getting goosebumps kind of stands hairs up on end, which can trap more heat next to the body. So we still have that trait in that we get goosebumps. It doesn't do as much for us now. It doesn't necessarily keep us warm, but it is something left over from our far back ancestors. Sweating is a good example. If we're starting to get too warm, our bodies give out sweat, which evaporates off of us, takes some heat away, and works to cool us. Shivering is a great example. When you're getting too cold, shivering helps to move your muscles, which generates heat. So that's great. And this shows that negative feedback loop that happens with humans. So our bodies like to be, somewhere around 37 degrees Celsius. We start getting too cold, our brain activates things like constricting our blood vessels. So that means we have less blood flow near the surface of our skin, and therefore we're giving off less heat that way. We shiver, our metabolic rate increases, because really our metabolism is what, creates our heat. And then our body temperature comes back up. And then we're back and happy near 37 degrees. Now if we're going down south where it's, too warm, or if we're exercising a lot, our temperature starts to get a little too high. Our brains tell our body to do things like dilate our blood vessels. So when we're exercising a lot or getting hot, our cheeks can get really red. So that means our blood vessels have dilated some. Dilate means getting wider underneath the surface, and that helps give off heat. And then we also start to sweat, and our body temperature comes back down to normal. Any questions about that stuff? We're making pretty good time. I didn't want to keep you here super long on this first one. Okay, if you have no questions, I have some practice ones for you if you'd like. Some people like practice questions, some people are not a fan, but I always feel like it's good studying to make your own practice questions, or review ones that I give you. So on this one, you can actually click right on what you think the answer is. I'm going to make results shown. So you can click in a complex animal like humans, tissues are grouped into, so this goes back to that first diagram that we looked at. I have a couple people say organs, so organs is correct. So cells are grouped into tissues, tissues are grouped into organs, organs are grouped into organ systems, and then organ systems make up the whole organism. So the correct answer is organs. All right, let me bring up another one for you. Question 2. In more complex animals, cells can be grouped into organs, tissues, systems, or minerals. So I think I have 3 people that have clicked an answer and saying, oops, I have results hidden here. I can show everybody. So most people are saying tissues. So that's correct. So cells group together to make tissues, those ones that we discussed. Very good. All right, question 3. Oh, there it is. So blood and bone are a type of extracellular matrix, connective tissue, adipose tissue, or nervous tissue. Most people are saying connective tissue, and that is correct. See, you're so smart. You're already going to pass. Question 4. What is the main function of most epithelial tissue? So is it being able to sense your surroundings, absorbing materials, supporting other structures, or covering surfaces?
Rebecca,
Yes.
it's Sarah here.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. I can't see your screen.
Oh, I think other people are
Yeah.
clicking. Have you not seen it at all this whole time?
No, I did see it, but it turned off for some reason.
So I'm bringing up questions now, and people are clicking on them, so I don't know if maybe if you refresh or...
Yeah. I'm probably gonna log out and log back in again.
Maybe try that.
Okay.
I can wait a second.
That's okay. You can keep going.
So most of you are saying, I'll just show the results to everybody. So some of you said absorbing materials and some said covering surfaces. So it's a bit of a trick question because some epithelial tissues will absorb because they are lining things like our digestive tract. But the main function of most of them are covering surfaces. So we'll go with covering surfaces. And sometimes, as you've probably learned, multiple choice can be a little bit tricky like that, unfortunately. All right, I don't remember what question was that. Was that one 4? Let me see if I can find 5. So this one is, which type of tissue differs from others because it contains an extracellular matrix? So is it epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, connective tissue, or nervous tissue? Some people are very quick. You guys must have good internet connections. So far everyone that clicked said connective tissue, and that is correct. The other types of tissues do not have that extracellular matrix. Good job. I think I have a couple more. Let's see here. Question 6. Which type of muscle tissue is only found in the heart? Cardiac, skeletal, adipose, or smooth muscle? Everyone's very quick on this one. And you are correct. It is cardiac muscle tissue. So you're only going to find that in your heart. Which type of tissue can contract slowly for a long period of time, like our intestines, to move food along? Again, you guys are very quick on that one, and you are correct. It is smooth muscle tissue. I think I have one more. If a person is starting to get too hot, what reaction might they have in their body? So starting to get too hot. So most people said blood vessels dilate, and that is correct. So when we get hot, we tend to get, rosy cheeks, and some people get like really red on arms and legs and everything, and that's bringing more blood to the surface so that it can give off more heat. All right, does anyone have any questions about anything? That's all the little review questions I had for you. I just wanted to point out that, I'll just reiterate, I guess, that some of our mastering links are not working. So if you're inside of a unit in Brightspace, those links are not working correctly. But if you go under Content and click on Mastering Biology links, all of the ones in there should work. So you should be able to access, your e-text, which may actually not be working at the moment, but I don't think that's our thing. Oh, that's good. I'm glad you like practice questions. I think it's always nice to kind of review what we just talked about. And so yeah, you can get to those Mastering Biology links, or you should be able to if you click on that unit that says Mastering Biology links rather than the individual ones in our unit. It's just that Pearson has made lots of updates, and Brightspace is we're still catching up with all of that stuff. So I apologize for any little glitches, but I like to be very flexible as a teacher, so hopefully you guys are very flexible and understanding as students too. Well, thank you guys for joining me this evening. Thank you. And so we have I put the dates in for our Skype on the calendar on Brightspace. So the next one is technically January 29th during Unit 2, but sometimes I like to put an extra little video that I do on my own partway through. So sometimes doing all like 2 body systems in one Skype is just a lot. So I'll see you again in 2 weeks. And please stay in contact, ask any questions you need to, okay? Email, ask in the Q&A board. But I hope things will go smoothly for you this semester. Have a good night.